Thank you for watching. My name is Rasha, and today I wanted to talk about domestic violence and abuse and what that can look like. There's a lot of misconception that it only entails physical abuse, but a lot of the times it can actually be verbal, sexual, psychological, emotional, spiritual, and financial. So I'm going to address a few of those. I wanted to touch on a few of these because these are internal scars that we don't see on the outside, and it is something that somebody carries for a really long time and sometimes for the rest of their lives. Something like verbal, emotional, and psychological abuse is a manipulation that an abuser has towards who they are abusing by name calling, diminishing their self esteem, where they feel like they need to stay with the abuser because unfortunately they feel like they can't be loved by anybody else, and they feel like they're emotionally relying on this person, and the abuser uses these tactics in order to diminish their self esteem to the point where they're not actually able to leave. This includes name calling, feeling like they're blaming the abused on everything that they're doing. It's an emotional abuse to the point where this person, the victim, feels like they have to tiptoe around the abuser all the times. Because they always feel like no matter what they say or do, it's going to be wrong. They're going to get yelled at. They're going to be made to feel like they don't matter, and that nobody loves them. And the abuser also uses these emotional methods to distance them from their friends and family. So a lot of the times, somebody becomes more anxious. They feel like they don't want to socialize or they can't anymore. That they're not reaching out to their friends and family, and this emotional manipulation is so that they can never reach out to anybody else, whether it's friends or family, and they feel that the only person that's important to them is the abuser. And this manipulation results in not wanting to go into work anymore because the abuser is constantly berating them, telling them things like, you're going to work and you're dressing this way. I don't want you dressing this way. Or that you're going to work to flirt with your coworkers, or you are going there to meet people, or that you're avoiding me. And the abuser says and does those things so that their self-esteem goes down to the point where they don't want to work anymore because they're afraid of making this person angry, and because the abuser's not okay with them going to work and having that independence. So they're wanting to be that emotional crutch for the victim, which unfortunately leads somebody to stay in an emotionally abusive relationship. And there's, a lot of misconception of people saying things like, well, why don't you just leave if you know that, somebody's being emotionally abusive? It's not that simple. It's not easy. An abuser is very narcissistic and very smart in their tactics. There is a lot of that emotional abuse, but what happens is they leave breadcrumbs for their victim. They do little nice things once in a while. If they yell at them, or if they make them feel like they're a nobody. Randomly, they'll bring in flowers. They'll take them out on the date. They'll make them feel like they're special, and so the victim has this glimmer of hope and thinks that they're going to change and that things are going to be okay and different. But what happens is that there's a cycle that they end up falling into where they are, again, the victim of emotional abuse, and then they do something that's nice for them, and the cycle continues. So it's really important to be able to spot the emotional abuse in the first place, and to let somebody know and to make them feel that they are important, they are loved, they don't deserve this at all. There's nothing that they can say or do that deserves this emotional manipulation, and that it is emotional manipulation in the first place. Another form of abuse can be financial. This is restricting access to money, vehicle, credit cards, bank accounts, so that the victim is not able to leave because they're financially relying on the abuser. What happens is they're not able to work, they're not able to have funds saved for them to ever leave. So if they have kids or they have pets, they feel that they can't be financially stable enough for them to leave this relationship. And that's a tactic that an abuser knows that they're doing in order to make the victim stay by making them dependent on them, especially financially, and to not only be held accountable for yourself, but for kids or pets. It makes it even more difficult for somebody to leave an abusive situation. And financially, it is very difficult for somebody to, pick up their lives and start something new. And when they're not able to even afford, to leave the house to go for lunch with somebody, and or even to get gas to be able to leave. It makes it very difficult for somebody to leave an abusive situation when they're being restricted financially. So when it comes to physical abuse, a lot of the times, yes, it is directed towards the victim. They unfortunately hit in places where they can't be seen right away. So it's unfortunately not what we see in the media. Somebody comes in with a black eye, and it does happen, but they do hit in places where they can cover up. So that's, with on the arms, on the stomach, on the thighs, anywhere like that, so that the abuser can continue to hurt them physically, but that the victim is able to cover up the areas where they are being abused. And physical can also entail breaking or damaging somebody's property. When it comes to your phone, it can be violence directed towards something else. So it doesn't have to be necessarily violence right at you. It can be violence around you. It can be verbal violence. They can say things like, "I'm going to hurt your family, your loved ones, your pets, our children, if you ever leave," and saying things like that, so that the victim is really, really afraid for their lives to leave. And it's also something that is really harmful. So another form of violence is sexual violence. And of course it is sexual assault and rape, but it can also include things like manipulating somebody to the point where they feel like they have to say yes in order to please their partner, or because, it's going to happen anyway, so might as well say yes. Times where they feel that they're being manipulated to also be sexual with somebody, with the fear of being outed, and saying things where you feel like you have to do something that you're not comfortable with in order to please your partner, which is not okay whatsoever. Anything that's forced or coerced is not okay. The sexual abuse is also very prevalent in the LGBTQ plus community, with the fear of being outed. So if they're ever involved with somebody and they're not out to the community, but this person knows about their sexual orientation or identity, they can threaten to out the person and to harm them in that way, to expose them when they're not ready. So that's a lot of sexual manipulation that we see with the LGBTQ plus community. Any type of abuse in a relationship is not okay. And this abuse may not even be necessarily with somebody that you're currently with. It can be somebody who was your ex-partner, somebody that you used to see, and it is not okay to be experiencing any of these. It's really important to stay in close contact with somebody who might be exposed to domestic violence or abuse, especially during these times, during quarantine and isolation, where somebody might feel like they don't have the ability to reach out. It's good to check in on them. And it's also important to know that there's nothing that anybody could ever do that will ever justify any type of abuse. There's no excuse for you to feel anything but love and are respected in a relationship. Anything other than that is unacceptable. And just know that there's a strong community out there that is wanting to support, and that we want to break the stigma of what domestic violence and abuse looks like, and that it can unfortunately come in many different forms, but that we should be addressing these different forms of abuse in order to let people know that the way that they're being treated is not okay. There's a lot of resources that are available if you ever feel like you want to talk to somebody, maybe not necessarily your friends or family. So it's important to check in your local communities for anonymous hotlines that you can reach out to, so that you can confidentially disclose this information and maybe seek help if you ever need to. So thank you for watching, and if you ever need to reach out or to learn more about our organization, please visit us at www.nadiashopefoundation.com. Thank you.